Today we're going to talk about closing in layers. Welcome to Surgical X, Surgery Explained. My name is Paul Halfman. I'm a certified surgical first assistant. We're going to talk about closing in layers. We're going to look at three basic layers. The first layer is a fascial layer, second layer being a deep dermal layer, and then the last, a superficial dermal layer. And what I picked up was this large foam and rubber suture pad that I actually cut in half. What? Yeah, and we're going to sew that back together in layers for this demonstration. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Here's our nice thick latex and sponge practice pad that I've cut in half with some kitchen shears, and we can identify here this lower layer. We'll call that our fascial layer. This will be fat or adipose layer, and then this upper layer we'll call the dermis, and we can just imagine that the epidermis sits on top of that. And we will start with the fascial layer. For that, I have an O ethibond that's nice and green so you can see it, and this first one's going to be a little tricky to see, but I'm going to do two. To give you some idea. So we are going to start superficially and then run deep. We're going to run from superficial to deep, which means our light just went out. Why did our light go out? Come on, light. Ta-da. Okay. That means our knot's going to sit on top. So, if I put them up on the edge, you might be able to see that better. Superficial. And I don't want to get the fat in there. To deep. We lost our light again. Let's finish this one. And then we'll address the light issue. So, on the other side, I'm going to go from deep to superficial. Again, I don't want to strangulate that fat. You'll end up with fat necrosis. And that's no good. For this demonstration, I'm going to instrument tie these to save on suture. So, there's one. I know you can't see this very well, but I'm going to do another one that you can see better. 2, 3, 4, and I'll put 5. And cut. Okay. Let's do another one. And I'm going to put it on the edge like this so it's a little easier for you to see. I'm going to go from superficial to deep. Same thing on the other side. And do a simple interrupted suture in the fascial layer. Now these are pretty far apart. Realistically, you want this watertight. So that would be the closure of our fascial layer. Next, let's close our deep dermal layer. For that, I have a 3-0 monocryl that's violet. Hopefully this will be able to be seen easier. I'm going to put us on edge again just to get us started. This is the outside. This is the inside. What I want to do is come below the dermis, come up through the dermis, and then on the other side, come through the dermis and out below the dermis. Now you'll notice that I'm going from deep to superficial on my initial throw. That'll put the tails down deep, which means our knot is going to be buried. Right? So deep to superficial. Superficial to deep, coming into the dermis and then out through the bottom of the dermis. Let's get our tails on the same side of our knot. Just like that. Okay, tails on the same side. And I'll tie this down. Now before I do that, I want to mention if this were a very thick fat layer, I might put a couple loose knots in there to bring the fat together. I don't think that's the case here. So, if we approximate these ends, I have the tail, bring these together, tie a knot, throw it down. I'll do two in the same direction, creating a slip knot, one in the other direction, creating a square knot, locking that in place. And then with the scissors, I will cut flush at the knot, and that knot is buried. See? Tails are down, the knot is down. We'll do one more. I'm going below the dermis, up through the dermis and out at the incision. And on the other side, I want to insert at the same level, the exact same level. If I don't, then the incision will be off. One side will be higher than the other. So this is a buried, interrupted suture. Now I know this tail is on the left, my post is on the right. We'll do one in that direction, another one in the same direction, creating that slip knot. Then I'll come back, square it off, and that locks it in place. Cutting flush. There it is. And lastly, on our superficial layer, we're going to do a running suture. So I can start that just like I started the dermal layer. With a single knot. That's going to have the tails where the knot's going to be down. So I went from superficial to deep. We'll do two in the same direction, one in the opposite. I like to do four because I'm going to cut this tail off. I'm going to leave this long leg. I'm going to cut this one off. And I do four just in case somebody gets too close to my knot when they cut it. Now you can see it's going to look like that. And what I want to do is really bury that knot by coming up underneath it, through the incision, come up underneath, and that'll flip that knot over and invert it. There you are. Okay, so now that knot's been flipped over. I went underneath it, it came out on the other side. So the knot's been flipped over. Then from here I'll do a running suture down at the edge of the dermis. From side to side. I'll give you a close view of this after I've done a few. Notice I'm using the needle as a retractor. I'm using the blunt end of the needle to bury or retract the tissue from one side to the other. Then I'll insert the needle tip and rotate through. And that arc of the needle is going to determine how big of a bite I get. If the edges are pretty well approximated like this, you could take nice big bites. Realistically, the edges aren't always perfect. And in those rough spots, you're going to want to take smaller bites. And actually, even starting out, you're going to want to take smaller bites. So, before I finish that one, well, let's go ahead and pull it. If I stretch it apart, that's what that's going to look like. Looks like a mess. Here. How's that? So when I get to the end, I'll call this the end. I want to back up one. I want to go back in the side of the dermis, out deep. In the opposite direction. Pull it together, and what I'll do is called the Aberdeen knot, which is, we'll go over it another time, but I've got a loop. I put my fingers through. I pull the post through the loop. And pull it down. Do one more here. I make a loop. I pull the post through the loop. I let go of that initial loop. Pull that down, and I've created another loop. Look at that. Lastly, we'll pass the needle through the loop like so. Pass the needle through the loop. That'll create a knot for us. And we'll finish just like we started. By coming up underneath the knot and swinging it deep. Then you cut flush. And there it is, another foam and latex life saved. Thank you for watching and subscribing. I really appreciate it. Please take care of yourself. Please take care of your patients and do the right thing every time. Thank you.